your next move is to fall in love with what you're doing. And again, there's multiple types of love. So we're not talking passion. We're not talking romance. We're talking about the love of relation, the love of reciprocity, of engaging with.
You're listening to the No Labels, No Limits podcast with best-selling author Sarah Box. We focus on the mantra, no labels, no limits, no excuses. And now, without further ado, please welcome your commanding coach with plenty of chutzpah and heart, Sarah Box.
Hey there, No Labels, No Limits podcast listeners. I'm Sarah Box, your host, and I want to officially welcome you to another insightful episode of the No Labels, No Limits podcast. You know, today we are joined by Justin McSweeny. He is a passionate explorer of human consciousness and philosophical hobbyist. Justin runs an interview series called IllumineLife, where he delves deep into the themes of meaning, sense-making, and the cultivation of wisdom and well-being. And he has a profound love of botany and horticulture. I'm going to ask him about that and how it influences him, because he says it brings a unique perspective to him and on growth, not just of plants, but of our own human potential. And his aim is to enrich our lives through his discussions, making this conversation very intriguing to me, and I hope for you as well, because I'm not exactly sure where it will go. He is someone who works through discussion, so I'm going to be open to see where it goes. And as we were joking before we hit record, we'll just leave the Dewey Decimal System of the Library of Thought open for this conversation. So with that, let me formally welcome Justin McSweeny to the No Labels, No Limits podcast. Hi, Justin.
Hello, Sarah. How are you today?
I'm doing really well, actually.
Good.
And I am curious, many things I'm curious about you, but I want to start by asking you to describe for folks what IllumineLife is, because that's your business, your focus. And I also think it sets a foundation for what we will be speaking about today. So could we start there?
Sure. And I appreciate you asking me that question. IllumineLife is a project that I started probably 6 years ago. At least the seeds were planted about 6 years ago. And what I did is I had somebody build a website for me. And I really wasn't sure what I was doing or what the end result would be. And to confess, I'm going to probably change a lot of what's in the website in the next few months or a month or two. And so it's an ongoing, continuously metamorphizing project. But to ground the intent of the project, it is a means for people to come in and I don't want to call it self-improvement. What I would say is it's a reframing project. It's a project to examine one's self. And so self could be different from identity or from persona. There's complexity in that. So I don't want to box anything in, but it is basically working on one's self, and whether that's improvement or, again, a restructuring, a reframing of how one engages with others and the world at large. I'll leave all that to the person that engages with the work. And to be shallow for a moment, the work is free. Everything I do, I have, like a lot of people on YouTube, I have a sort of what is it called? It's like Patreon. I forget what it's called, but it's one of those things where you can donate a couple bucks if it was of any value to you. So I decided to do that. I did have a paywall on it a couple of years ago, and I took it off. I want to be somewhat egalitarian. Plus, I also want to do a social experiment and see, if people take a free ride on it, that's fine, because I don't commodify everything. I try to make sure that I need to make a living, obviously, but I have a day job, so that's covered. So to drill down a little bit more into the work, it is a combination of kind of mindfulness practices and then a little bit of monologic thought ideas, thought models, things that I put out there, again, to help people just reflect and unpack themselves a little bit and see what they discover. So to disclaim a little bit, there's no psychology here. Maybe a little bit of a mentory flavor to it, like I'm mentoring folks with the monologues. But it's all very coarse grain. It's nothing really deep that, because if somebody is dealing with issues that require a clinician or a therapist, I want to be absolutely certain that they go into that direction to take care of things. So it's a more general and ginger application of how we can examine ourselves and look into our psyche a little bit and see what's going on. So that might be a good description to start.
Well, it is a description, and I'm so glad to hear that you're evolving it, not because I think anything's wrong with it, but because as we grow, we learn. Right?
Absolutely, yeah.
So tell me what's been one of your takeaways from your experiment up to this point, knowing that more is on the way, because somewhere along the line you've gotten some ideas that you're going to evolve this, right? But what were some of the nuggets you've taken from that have helped you?
I think for my own development and satisfaction of, what am I getting from my own endeavors, I would say that it is exactly that, as you pointed out, the ongoing amorphous nature of what it is that I'm striving for. And I think that maps well with not only the human experience, but what we observe in nature and what we observe in wisdom traditions, Wu Wei and the Tao and all these wonderful things that have been handed to us by our ancestors. And even in the West, there's ideas of surrender, letting go, and not piling a bunch of expectations on the next frame of reality as it unfolds. And so that has been it has been my teacher. It has been a reciprocal relationship with the endeavor. And I don't want to speak as though it has helped me or helped me grow, because I'm not a good judge of that. I have to have an outside observer to say, okay, Justin, you did well this week or this year or whatever. So, but I would aspire to that. So rather than saying, oh, yes, I've accomplished, I just say I aspire to continue the growth and to continue just observing. And by growth, I don't even mean a linear kind of growth, just more, working with more information, working with more system related, again, incorporating wisdom traditions from the past. So just all these new inputs that can come in and make it a better project. And one nice thing is there's not a lot of people that come to the website right now. So it's been just my little baby in my little corner of the universe that I can play around with. Eventually, I'd like to get.
We call that our sandbox. So our sandbox evolved, and it now is something. But our sandbox, before it became our sandbox, was our playground as a team.
Okay.
Like, let's put it in the sandbox. What do we make out of it, right? So the expectations were low, but the curiosity high.
Mm-hmm.
It's like, oh, that was interesting. Not sure. Oh yeah, that really helped a lot of people. So, and that's part of it, is putting yourself out there and just testing, because we don't know if we don't try stuff. Yeah,
for sure. And I love the sandbox analogy because it's multidimensional. You have the sand itself, which is a supporting structure, but it gives. You can move it and mold it, and then you have your Tonka toys in the sandbox. I'm giving away my generation here, but you have your toys and you learn, because those toys are there to help you with tactile skills and problem solving and all that kind of stuff. So I absolutely love the sandbox analogy.
Sometimes it's just fun to hang out there. Well, I'm amazed because now I look at, they have all these challenges and because of the internet and all of our connectivity, you can actually see what people do. I'm thinking, oh, wow, those guys made this incredible sand art.
Yeah.
Yeah, it was way more than I envisioned. So it's so fun though.
Mm-hmm.
Let me challenge you.
Okay.
Here. It's not really a test. There's no pass fail. But and I know it's hard to tell your growth, right? Sometimes because you're in it. You're learning, you're growing, you're changing, you're all of, some of the places we don't even know we were there because we're not there anymore.
Mm-hmm.
But they all contribute to where you are now. So if I was to go to a coffee shop with you and you didn't know, but I invited the Justin of 6 years ago, what would he be like walking in?
Let's see, 2018. Well, that's around the time that I was having this sort of flowering of ideas, but yet not the orientation was not quite there and the direction was not quite there. So if I were to engage with that, Justin, I would be very, very cautious not to lead them and say, I would speak more broadly to them and ask them in a Socratic method, as any good coach would do. I would ask certain questions to maybe light things a little bit so that there's a gentle little course correction or a gentle little trajectory shift that I think that he could benefit from. But yeah, it would be a neat conversation, but I would have to really restrain myself to not, they get into those weird paradoxes like, you travel in time and then you go back and you do something and, all those weird things and strange stuff happens. Yeah, exactly. So I'd be very ginger about that, but it would be fun to engage that need. Yeah.
Well, I think he'd probably be pretty interesting because he'd be seeking for something. And so he probably would be pulling threads on you or me, like so-and-so. Well, I'm kicking this around.
Right.
So anyway, I think about that sometimes when people ask me like, what's different? I'm thinking, I really have to go back and get into the head of that part of me. Like, what was I thinking about at that time? And then I realized that some of those things that I was worried about never came to pass. And I exceeded what I thought I could do. It's like, it's so interesting to do that in a way that's just a personal interest, which the reason I asked you that is you're interested in exploring sense-making.
Mm-hmm.
So it was a chunky transition, but that's where I'd like to take the conversation next, if you're good for it.
Okay, absolutely. And you're having asked me about 6 years ago reminds me of a quote I heard. I'm going to butcher it, but I'll try to, clobber it out a little bit. And somebody, an intellectual person whom I respect, and I don't remember who it was a few weeks ago, said something in an interview, and they said, your best coach or your best mentor is you of 6 years ago, except there's no voicemail. It's like they can't connect with you. So I'm intrigued by how we just covered that. Either you or myself of 6 years ago, and then thinking what sage could we extract in their input, in their conversation. Now, of course, I think I know what I am or was 6 years ago, but really when we get into, and there's things in the literature about this, there's a lot of confabulation about the histories that we retrieve. In fact, we alter the histories that we retrieve when we recall. So if I think back to 2018 and the me of that time, I am influencing the history there. And this is all abstract. There's nothing weird going on. It's just so anyway, it's got me thinking about that.
No, I actually think that's a valuable point to make because we believe the truth we tell ourselves, right? Yeah. But it's colored by what's happened in the meantime. Right? We have more information. We have more life experience, regardless of what it is, that looking back, it shifts. And it may not be a huge shift, but it does shift. And one of my cousins, I don't talk to her very often, but she's hilarious. And so she's asked me about this sun event. And I said, here's one thing I know about life and family. And I said, you and I and all the folks she named, I said, name the situation, we'll all know it different. She started laughing. She goes, that's so true. I says, oh yeah, you guys, because there's an age gap. I says, you all remember this in one way. And I'm thinking, that's not how it went down because I'm remembering it as a different, not much different generation, but a different generation, right? But it's true. You look back and you're thinking, and even within my own sibling group, it's like, well, remember that. And I'm thinking, what? Really?
Yeah.
So we all put overlays on it. So I think that's an important point you make. You could go back, but it's going to be influenced by the Justin you are today.
Right. And that's, to quote some of the cogsci people, that's perspectival knowing. It is the uniqueness of your aspectual framing of that situation. And like you said, the generational difference can be significant too. So.
Yeah, and I mean, it's just, I find it so fascinating. Is it helpful? Sometimes it's just entertaining.
Yeah.
It's like, isn't that entertaining? Don't buy into it too. Like even my own stories, it's like, Sarah, that's just your version.
Yeah.
Don't get too hung up on it. It might be wrong.
Right. Yeah.
And it saves me a lot of apologies. I could be wrong, but that's how I recall it. So anyway, let's
a disclaimer.
It's helpful to know that I may, and I'm likely not the final expert on that topic.
There you go.
In remembering. So
there you go.
you talk about sense making and
Yes.
cultivating wisdom. So how has doing that personally transformed you or changed you in your approach, both in business or in interactions with other folks?
In my, I won't call it a pursuit of wisdom, but I will call it an appreciation for those fleeting moments when wisdom becomes apparent and I don't dare grasp it, that the prudence, or to throw a really fancy word out, the Sophrosyne that arises from, which is a fancy way, it's kind of prudence married with what's your next move, as a prudent kind of thing, and it's has an action quality to it. And
there's need to put a thesaurus with this.
I know. I will not drop too many crazy words, but it's a beautiful word.
It's fun.
Sophrosyne is a beautiful word. The fastest coarse grain thing you can do with it is say it's a kind of prudence. It's a species of prudence, but it's very complex. It goes beyond that. But anyway, so it teaches what I would say in understanding wisdom is that this is my take, so I'll just put my caveat out there. This is just how I would handle it, is that wisdom, like anything else, should be allowed to arise in a person, and it can be fleeting and fade away, or it can sustain itself for a while. But what I would caution is that we not self-deceive and say that we are wise, or that we attach to someone who thinks they are wise or claims to be wise, a charismatic person or whatever, is to say that wisdom is a sort of gossamer quality of our psyche, of our beingness, much like I could use a closer analogy, happiness. When I talk to people, I say, let happiness arise within you and then let it leave, but don't seek, especially the hedonic form of happiness. The eudaimonic form of happiness. Okay, I equate that with well-being.
Go on,
Yeah. But anyway, I will put wisdom and happiness on the same sort of thing, where we just let it be with us, let it come in, and then let it flow out. So I say all of that so that one day we can be just an absolute mess, and we can be really poor decision makers, and we can be allowed to be frail and all these things, because if we put that kind of tremendous pressure on ourselves to be little Buddhas or little, Jesus or whatever, we're gonna crash and burn. And so this gives us that freedom of flexibility and oscillation in our temperance, and that's kind of what Sophrosyne is. It's recognizing that fallibility, that limitation, and saying, allow me to just be an open book or a blank slate, or however you want to say that, when it comes to these kind of things moving through me. Rather than me trying to concretize or reify this quality of wisdom, and that I will embody the archetype of wisdom or all that kind of, just grant yourself that grace and the Sophrosyne to be with it, but not to try to hold it, to try to grasp it and force yourself to be happy or wise, or any of those other qualities that we aspire to.
How do we recognize wisdom from zeitgeist?
Okay, so the zeitgeist, as I would interpret it, is the spirit of what's going on in a situation or in the world. So the zeitgeist of the culture. And the geist of the culture is something, I'll reference a dead philosopher that Hegel spoke to, and the geist is the spirit of humanity. It is also a broader spirit that is extended out of us. And I'm not a Hegelian, and he's an extremely difficult person to understand, but a little nuggets here and there. So he speaks to the geist, which again could be the zeitgeist. Zeit is the house, and the geist is the ghost. And so it's the ghost, within a context. But the geist itself is the spirit. And it is, our conversation is a geist. We are exchanging thoughts and ideas, translating information back and forth, and hopefully imbuing that out into the audience. And so the zeitgeist, bring me back in. What was the question? I spent so much time explaining zeitgeist. I didn't get reel me back in here, Sarah. Thank you.
So the question has an underlying assumption which may be flawed. So I am going to acknowledge that, and you might say there is no difference.
Between zeitgeist and wisdom.
And wisdom, right? Because if, the ghost of the house, and also for me, my understanding and the context is that zeitgeist is driven culturally, maybe by a time or a time frame. Is that correct?
Yeah. Yeah.
Okay.
It's the spirit of the times.
Wisdom. Yeah. So wisdom, which feels more anchored or repeatable over centuries.
Yeah. Okay.
Let me ask.
Yes.
Is that a flawed assumption?
I would cleave wisdom and zeitgeist, and there may be a Venn overlap, like there may be a little space where there is wisdom in the culture, there is wisdom in the practice of the culture that propagates the zeitgeist. So let's bring the meme in as well. The meme is, and for people under 30, it's something you post on, TikTok or Twitter or Facebook, or they probably don't do, but Instagram. Okay. And so that is a meme, but also meme is similar to a gene, and it is something that is passed either generationally or it's heritable in the social sphere. And so the meme itself is a communication vector or tool, or however you want to frame that. So let's put that in with the zeitgeist, with the culture, practicing things that happen in the culture, fatty things. So I call them thought viruses. Like, there's words that we say, not so much. It is what it is. Or, everybody's saying literally right now. Every sentence starts with literally or I mean, and those are more pause fillers but that's kind of what goes on is we're spreading this idea. And that's the meme. That is the ecology of social interaction, the psychosocial domain. And so I'll bring all this back together now that I'm way out flapping like a sheet in the wind here.
This is actually, for me, it's fun. So
okay. So if the zeitgeist through the meme is endeavoring to be wise and not in a performative, superficial, for the sake of Instagram or any of these other, I'm speaking in modern terms, but for the sake of vanity, that we are genuinely being wise in the moment, in the zeitgeist, that's when I see the Venn overlap. That's when I see that the culture in action can cultivate wisdom. And of course, antithetically, or the opposite, is that we can cultivate, and to me, the opposite of wisdom is foolishness. It is, can be BS, if I can say those letters together. It can be that too.
Those words to me.
Well, it's a technical philosophical term. There's a guy named Harry Frankfurt, and he wrote a book called On BS, and I won't use the full word, but and it's when we it's not a lie, but when we offer some kind of salience to ourselves that's not true. So something is, and I just interviewed a philosopher yesterday. He said advertising is BS because it's telling you a story about if you buy our beer or our snack food, that you're going to be young, you're going to be gorgeous, you're going to be in a beautiful location, and you're smiling, and so that's how we deceive. That's self-deception or collective zeitgeist deception. So anyway, yes, to get to your question, I would say that the zeitgeist and wisdom can be in they're commensurate, or they can be in union with each other fleetingly. Again, just like it is in our individual self. Because one thing I like to do as a thought model for myself is that the individual and the collective can bear the same kind of qualities. So a group of people can have the same affective states, the same emotional states, again, when they influence each other. Let's say we're in a room together, there's 15 of us, and we're having a wonderful time, that's contagious. And again, it's the meme, it's the zeitgeist, it's all these things engaging in the participatory fashion with those people. And the mood can be jovial and frivolous and wonderful. Obviously, there's opposites to that. And we won't focus on that so much, right? We'll stick on the rosy side of things. But yeah, so that's how I would probably unpack everything and then try to marry them or weave a tapestry with all of them together.
So what's interesting to me is the piece that I was curious about, you answered in a different way, but incidentally, when you talked about talking with the philosopher and he talked about advertising being it's a story that's a lie inherently, right? Not all the time. I don't want to do a blanket statement.
Yeah, I mean, yeah. I'm sorry. It's just attention capture and it's seduction. It's usually either hijacking our fear or our lust or our oxytocin. Like we fall in love with something that's going on, or we become seduced or turned on by, again, youth and beauty and all these things, or they make you fearful, like, 1 in 5 homes will be broken into and your family's next, this guy, buy our alarm system, that kind of stuff. And you're sitting at home eating your dinner and you're like, what's the number? Yeah, not that everybody does that, but it's
come
just
here, Spike, my alarm.
Yeah, exactly.
But that's the thing for me, is if that is the thing that we're buying into, right? And the alarm system won't work in my analogy. But my question is, that's where you start to say there could be a tinting over it, that then becomes mistaken or applied wrongly as wisdom. Like we know that, in fact, we are so smart because when it's not necessarily that. So that's where I was kind of going with, like, do we mistakenly assume what's given as knowledge and wisdom, but might in fact be zeitgeist? So probably the listeners now are going, where are you going with this? So I'll off with it.
We can put it in reverse and go.
Well, that's the beauty of changing course. But
yes.
For me, the whole concept of sense making, I think I didn't even get introduced to it until like the 80s. And it was, it's not like it's a new concept, but for me, that whole ability to take events and then what is the sense you're making out of it and how is it influenced by other things was a relief, in the sense that it doesn't necessarily mean that what I think it means that. So what am I giving power to that may or may not even exist? So let's take all this philosophical concept and tell me practically. Let's talk about, how do we take this higher stuff, or more theoretical, philosophical, and marry it with some practicality. So how do you apply these philosophical concepts practically to like an everyday life or challenge, especially if you're helping others or you're being asked to help them navigate in their own quest?
One idea that I'll bring in to start with is that, yes, all of that heady stuff is quite lofty and it's quite abstruse, which is another word, obnoxious. Abstruse means very difficult to understand. And I've tortured myself for years trying to just understand certain things, certain terms and philosophers and all that stuff. And my depth is still shallow. I would never, ever dare to say I understand a lot of that stuff. But anyway, so we must acknowledge that as you did. And then what I would say is, just like electricity, there's a stepping down process at junctions and transfer stations and things like that. Let's move into that. We're going from 100,000 volts. We'll go down to a typical household current of like 120 volts.
A bit of impedance.
Yes, exactly. With maybe 100 amps behind us instead of, a bazillion amps or whatever. Okay. What I would then say is that if you're curious about lensing life and seeing sense making in a way that's different from what you were doing yesterday, is that I would ask you to, let's bring a buffet analogy in here, that you just go to the buffet of philosophy and take a little plate, certainly not more than you want to consume at that moment. Bring it back with you to your virtual table at your home or wherever you reside and work with it, digest it. I'm going to stretch this metaphor. Digest that new epistemic caloric content that you just brought in, new information. And the whole point of philosophy is philosophia. It is the love of wisdom. And you can invert that and say the wisdom of love, and they can relate to each other. It's cheesy, but I'm just going to throw that in there. Now, the love of wisdom. Do you want to fall in love with the wiser you, the you that has prudence and Sophrosyne and discretion, is averse to foolishness, is averse to self-deception? These are invitations, and these are questions that only the audience person can answer for themselves. Now, if the answer is affirmative, but cautious, or like, oh, I don't want to deal with all that nonsense, there are people who step it down, certainly not me, but there are people who are academically qualified, and they will bring a second order of decoding or understanding of the work that is palatable. To keep abusing that poor buffet metaphor. And those are the people that I would steer people to and say, okay, find someone that you can connect with and relate with, that can convey the information, decode some of the obnoxious stuff, and to make it available to you cognitively in a sense-making kind of way, so that the sense-making is good, it's fluid, you're onboarding the new information. Then what you do with that is you incorporate that into your daily routine, into your way making in the world, and the sense making that can become autonomic, it can become very natural. And you will be amazed that just taking little chunks at a time and weaving that into your sense-making system. And sense-making can be as primitive as just, your sense organs are onboarding information, or that there's other orders, abstracted orders of sense-making, like metacognition, where I'm thinking about thinking. I'm reflecting on what I just did, or I'm reflecting on, or I'm proflecting, or whatever that is, into the future. I'm predicting, I'm modeling, I'm trying to understand what calculus do I, or what algorithms am I incorporating to engage with people, engage with situations, good or bad, difficult situations, especially difficult situations, that if you can have some of that, the utilities of the wisdom that can be, it's like a tool in the toolbox. You can just have it available to use and take it out when you need it. And, I'm not going to lie. I mean, it's not going to make everything, work wonderfully, but I think any endeavor, any effort in aligning yourself to that and in, actualizing these practices, that's where I think we can go from the high, lofty heights to the what I would call street level, like mundane every day. But it's the onboarding process that is genuinely apprehended, genuinely understood and applied when necessary, that you will start to notice that dealing with life, dealing with people, and dealing with situations or the environment may not be such a toll-taking experience or such a burdensome experience for you. It's a thought. It's not a strong statement. It's just, it's an invitation. It's an opportunity for you to consider, which is a philosophical move. But we just did philosophy. Think about arming yourself with ideas or thoughts that the wise folks, and this comes from theology too. There's so much wisdom in the wisdom traditions, whether it's the Abrahamic systems of the West or stuff from, the Eastern traditions. It's all there. So it's not just these crazy old German guys that were running or talking some crazy stuff in the last, or even the Greeks. The Greeks from the axial age or whatever. So anyway, I'll stop there and see how you want to move from here.
Well, what I will say about that is that I didn't predict or forecast where this interview would go because I didn't know. I still don't know, but which is great. I like it. But I want to stick with your metaphor of the buffet. So okay. I live in Nevada, and casinos were big. I mean, casinos were big here. They're more common throughout the U.S.
Yeah,
especially on tribal lands and stuff. For reasons, they make good money.
Yes.
Different story. Don't want to go there right now. But one thing they are known for is big buffets, very inexpensive considering to what you would pay at a restaurant. Typically, if that's a good casino, it's good quality buffet. And you never want to go through the whole buffet, ever. You're just like, are you kidding? That's just like crazy to have that much food. So let's pretend we're at the buffet and you are the maitre d' of the whole room. And I'm saying, look, so get your little suit and tie on, Justin.
That's it, my little rose boutonniere.
Exactly.
My little whisk broom in case I need to clean something.
The quality places, you are going to have that.
Top notch. So, okay.
Just so you know.
Okay, I'm prepared.
And you're going to have some fun too, because people are there wanting to have fun. But I come there, I'm your person, and I'm saying, look, man, I'm really struggling here with this. Let's keep it at business, not anything heavy duty where you need to refer me to a psychologist or anything.
Right.
But I am having trouble figuring out what my next best step is. Now, I know that there are some questions that I could ask myself because I ask them of clients, but I guess what I'm asking you is, so you've got this, the lay of the buffet, right? So what philosopher or tradition might you point me towards to say, you know what, these are some of the really powerful questions. And you might look to this expert, because you said go to someone, look at what people have shared in that wisdom tradition. That in itself is a big buffet, right? It's a lot. It's huge. So I guess I'm asking, how could we reverse engineer it so that I might start in one place with a result that I could get? So I think about the questions like, when people say, do I need to share this? Well, is it kind? Is it useful? Is it helpful? Is it applicable? And those are variations of it. But that didn't come from me. And it didn't come from the people I heard it from. It's come down tradition-wise because it's a thought process in terms of what is your intent? What are you trying to acquire? So I guess my question for you is, send me in a direction of one or two of the folks that you most frequently turn to, or when people ask you, you say, start here. It's digestible. You're not going to drive yourself nuts. And it will probably pique your interest to learn more.
Mm-hmm. Okay. When you brought our customer in and they said, what is the next best move for me? Which again is an algorithmic proposition. I would need some background on what is prompting the question beyond just the obviousness of the question. So in other words, are we talking about matters of the heart? And this is necessary so that I can then, vector them into a philosophy.
No, I'm with you.
Is this a matter of the heart? Is this a matter of more of the intellect, that you have, a fork in the road, career-wise, or something a little more technical in your life? Or is it a matter of you feeling unhomed within yourself, that your heart and maybe relationships that you're in or have been in, that there's discordant patterns there. There is a kind of malaise going on. So that would be the relationship. I'd want to start with that person, and if you want to then
I'll
vicariously bring that.
I'll tell you.
Yeah. Go ahead. Yeah.
So it is not personal, but it is of I've created a business. This is my little person. Okay. And there is a malaise of what is not from disinterest, but just from not knowing, like, what have I done here? Like, do I keep doing this and create something beyond what I want or didn't want? So I wouldn't say it's inertia, but it's like that hesitancy to go further because I don't know where I am. I'm lost. So, which I think weaves in some of your other situations.
Okay. So there is a confidence matter going on in terms of taking on the task of being a proficient or competent business owner. And I've owned a few businesses, so I've been there. I had a restaurant, a newsstand, and a couple of landscape businesses. So I've been in those shoes. Okay, so to speak to that, I would say that we need to understand maybe our nature a little bit, to say that everything you're going through is normal, everything you're going through is fine. Hats off to you for having the courage to step out of sort of the normalcy of, just getting a job and, showing up and doing the tasks and getting paid, et cetera. You are embarking on, as they say, jumping into a void, and there is a lot of complex unknowns going on there. And the most complex unknown is that pulling out of you, is the creativity and the trust in that you to be competent and disciplined and passionate enough to carry the good idea that was here and the seed that was planted. And I don't know how far along they are in the development of their business, but let's say that we want to amplify, or we want to put a spotlight on that concern right there is, where is your passion? Where is I'll bring Venn diagrams back in, where there's the overlap of competency, discipline, passion, and maybe a little bit of practical sense for how to manage that business, because you're going to need a little bit of bookkeeping skills. You're going to need to know how to interact with state agencies, all of that kind of stuff. They're very trivial and mundane, but it's nonetheless necessary. Not trivial, but just boring. Yeah. So we have all that. Now, I couldn't speak to a particular philosopher who addresses that because they're up there in these high, lofty heights. But what I would say is, overall, that's all philosophers do, is ask these kind of questions about, what are we made of? What drives us? What propels us into our futures as more competent human agents. So for me, I think what I would do is lean into a little bit of what the existentialists were talking about. Their premise, and this is going to be, Jean-Paul Sartre, who some people look down on as a philosopher, kind of kicked out this question that existence precedes essence. That's his formula. And that speaks to a kind of blank slate that you are when you're a child. You're not a complete person at 10 years old or 5 years old. It's an onboarding process, and we have to continually see ourselves as layers being stacked of all these various little micro competencies, micro passions, all these little things that build up over time. So examining some of the work of unpacking the essential self from an existential self might be a salve or a little bit of an elixir to fortify you in that sense. And then I might move you back into more broadly the German idealists, who were dealing with a equally concerning problem that the existentialists in the 1950s, mid-century, 20th century were dealing with. And so we'll go back to the 1860s, 70s in the salons of the Weimar region, and they were all, kicking these crazy ideas around. They were more concerned about how, now that the West has entered into the age of reason and the age of logical positivism and empiricism and all this big stuff, which is basically a bifurcation of church and science and reason, as they would like to call it. And we're now, and this is Europe, we're drifting away from that which kept us glued together in a spiritual sense. And we're being expected to now replace it with, again, logic, reason, empiricism, rationality, utilitarianism, instrumentalism, functionalism, all these funny isms that were popping up in the mid to late 19th century, which can just absolutely floor us because it really takes the humanity out of that. And so that we're still dealing with that. It's still an artifact of our times because, and it's implicit, but it's also explicit. And there's still kind of a tug of war going on between science and faith. And I won't open that big old box up, but the idea is that we live in a post-Enlightenment project era. And I think it will continue for quite some time until we have other means of sense-making and wisdom tradition cultivation, yada, 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 that can deal with that. But I'd say this is still, we're inheriting that legacy. That can really put us into some blind spot binds that we don't really recognize. So again, this goes to the heart, the passion, the sense of confidence in the drive, in the faith in oneself. Again, it's implicit in our education and all these other things that, not to reduce us to these kind of zombie automata that have no soul, ensoulment or anything like that. But I think that's still in the zeitgeist. Okay. It's just a broader zeitgeist of maybe a century and a half. That has to be reckoned with, and that can be part of the insecurity. It may be very faint for a lot of people, but I think it's also part of our Western inheritance from those ancestors that, the ancestors that did the cleaving, not so much the idealists that were trying to work this thing out. But what those German idealists were doing was working with how do we put back together a system that gives us meaning, that gives us a sense of purpose in our lives. Again, prior to let's say the dawn of the 19th century, you went to church and that was dealt with. And that's the huge value that the church brought to people, and it gave them purpose, sense, and meaning in their lives, and it was a sort of a top-down hierarchical kind of thing, and there are people obviously who are still of faith, and that's still a good sense-making system and a meaning-making and purpose-making system. But again, I think that's part of a fracture that's going on, and the existentialists dealt with it too. And I know I'm rambling here, but I will get to some. So the German idealists were trying to put it back together again and say, well, how can we have a religion that's not a religion? Or how can we have a faith-based system that is yielding toward more empirical, less superstitious? And this was their mindset. I'm just sort of lensing how they were doing it. And they tried to get back to the heart. They tried to get back to a way of grounding themselves in something other than nihilism that comes from just pure reason and logic, like Mr. Spock and all that kind of stuff. So this is a long tangent, and I do apologize, but I think it's essential that we understand that is our background. And so when we are that young entrepreneur, that anxious entrepreneur, that we can learn perhaps from that to say, I have to have faith in something. I have to have a belief in something. I have to have a sense of purpose. And so what is the wisdom tradition? It can be faith. It can be a faith-based system. That's cool. But if you're more of a secular person, there are wisdom tradition tools that can cultivate that sense of confidence and that sense of, I have a purpose, I have a worth, and that I can go. So I would leave that entirely up to the listener, how that comes to be, or the person that our hypothetical person, is to just point that out to them and say, look, there are a lot of minds have gone to the trouble of figuring out these, because the business opening and all the threats and things, that's the same kind of thing that's going on in all of our lives every day, just living in Western society. I'll stop there, see if that does anything. It may have been just a long-winded rant, but
no, I don't think so.
I hope there was substance to it.
There was substance there in a number of areas. First of all, recognizing that it is not unique, that it is, you could label it different. The experience being presented will be different, but there are some underlying concerns and questions that we may or may not even be conscious of, that are, I would say, just kind of the part of our DNA, which I'm not really talking about real DNA, but just like just come forth. And I loved how you wove zeitgeist in there in your response. I'm going, thanks for that.
Yeah.
No, that was a good answer. It was an answer that I think we always want these little pat answers like do A, B, and C, right? Like the example of the advertisement, do this, do that, and you're going to be great. And those are nice tools. But in my mind, the tool without the application and then the reflection on the app, like why me, why that, what did that help? Why did it help? Am I feeling more clear? Why? Or like really having to do some self-reflection, because otherwise we're just talking about other people, and it's really us that's in the soup.
One amendment that I've had a moment to cool the engine off a little bit is everything I kind of just described, whether it's faith-based systems or logic-based systems, they're called psychotechnologies. They are virtual engines of our sense-making, whether, again, it's the faith system and the narratives there, or, again, it's more of a rationalist kind of dry intellectual perspective. These are what we could call psychotechnologies. They are abstract technologies, unlike computers or physical, tangible things. You can't escape it. And that is essential in the algorithmic sense-making process of being a good business owner. So one way or another, you're going to onboard a psychotechnology to then help you propel yourself to be a successful person. And luck counts too, I have to say, as a former business. You have to, and I don't know, I'm not superstitious. So I just think it's, you have to do everything that you can do, and then just, let things coalesce around you. So, but these psychotechnologies, I bring that term up for a reason, that if you allow yourself, again, to gently work with what others have brought forward from trial and error, and be humble enough to say, oh, okay, you can have all the confidence in the world in the dream that you have and the vision that you have for your business that builds widgets or virtual widgets or whatever you're doing. That's good. But then ground yourself in humility to say, I need all the assistance I can get to be that champion that I am. So I'll throw that in. So psychotechnologies are your virtual friends. They are your virtual support system. They're your coaches, your mentors. And this sounds really weird, but like wisdom is time invariant. It goes back to when we started using this thing to blah, 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 and it has been onboarding and building. And we're still talking about philosophers that lived 2,500 or 3,000 years ago. Well, not all of us, but, it's there, and their information and ideas are still here. You can't grasp them, but again, that's psychotechnology. The faith traditions are psychotechnologies. The Abrahamic systems, the Eastern systems, they're psychotechnologies. They have, again, algorithms built in that sense make, and so anyway, I won't load too much more into that, but just see it that way, and know that anything you employ and engage with that isn't a physical tool like a hammer or something is your friend. And if you're engaging with it in honest and serious play and interaction, that it will be that much more that you can use to forward yourself as a person who can make a success out of your endeavor and your dream and your baby. When I opened businesses, they were my babies. And I had to look at it that way, that I had to keep that thing alive and keep it healthy. Don't drop it. Don't give it away to a stranger. All these things. I'm dropping so many analogies here, but yeah, you got to fall in love with that project.
Yeah. Well, it's hard to sustain it if you don't.
Exactly. Passion is part of it. And,
it is, absolutely. So I'm going to end the podcast on a different twist.
Okay.
I want to talk about, you talk about the love of botany and horticulture. Where did that come into your life?
Oh, it has a very dark, shadowy provenance. Can we talk about things that are kind of adult in nature? Are you okay?
Well, you know what?
It relates to botany, but it's, yeah. Yes. I just
go ahead. I can edit it out if I don't.
Okay. Oh, okay. When I was 13, I started growing marijuana, and I fell in love with the plant. And yes, I was a pothead as a teenager, and I say to young people, don't do what I did, as a caveat. As an older person, just say no or whatever it is. Anyway, so that's what started it. Is this was the early '80s, and still kind of before Reagan and all that kind of stuff really started to kick in. I just it was part of the community, it was part of the culture, and it just the plant itself was interesting. And I also worked in agriculture back then on farms. And seeing the cycle, raising corn and especially a lot of the field grasses like Timothy grass, hay, alfalfa, things like that, because I did work for a farmer. I was born in Washington, D.C., but then my mother got me out of the city and put me into the bucolic life to, keep me away from trouble. And that's when I started growing pot. So go figure. I was just determined to be a pernicious little child. So anyway, or menacious child, sorry. It just kind of sunk into me. And then I took a horticulture class in high school, and that was neat. And when I moved to Florida at the age of 21, I looked around at the verdancy of everything, and I wasn't smoking pot anymore. So I grew up. Anyway, it was a whole new world. And being the ADHD curious kind of person that I am, I started just seeing so much variety and so much distinction in the botany. In what was going on. And in Virginia, where I had lived, there were forests and they were beautiful, but it was just not the same relationship. I would go out and walk the forests and be in nature, but it didn't land as well. Getting down here, seeing mostly palm trees and tropical fruit trees and all the things that Florida has to offer just blew my mind. I was just, whoa. So this is before the internet. I just started buying books and like, what is this? What do I behold here? And it was my first sapiential or sentient kind of pursuit. I was not a good student, and because I was dyslexic and I had a terrible time with school. So this was something that was deeply engaging with me, and so I reciprocated by getting the books and onboarding the information. So starting in the early 90s, I bought every palm I could find just to start a collection, and then I curated that and furthered that over the years, and then learned to care for them and learned how to kill them and keep some of them alive and all this stuff. So then it just grew into a broader love of plants. I actually have a channel on YouTube that I started about 15 years ago, and I've uploaded almost 12 or 1,300 videos, and they're very short, but they all are horticulture related. And what they are is just little primers for me. This is such and such plant. It's the genus and species and some cultural notes about the plant. And that way I can go back to it anytime I want. But the win-win on that is that the public can also access the channel. And it's done well. It's got a couple million views, and, people are utilizing it. And I get corrections too, which is awesome. I'll have a bad name or I'll misidentify things. And so it's neat. It's self-correcting in that sense. So it's a good project. But yeah, that's a real short kind of pitch but it's in my heart. And I do, again, ADHD, I kind of have this obsessive personality. So just beyond these doors, I have a pergola with dozens and dozens of rare plants and things. And I go out and I love them and I take care of them. And then a lot of my the social activities revolve around that. In fact, I went out this morning to, it's called Jamaica Farms, and it's a guy from Jamaica who's growing, he has 160 varieties of mangoes, and he has Scotch bonnet peppers and rows and sugar apples and bananas and plantains. And we just went out there and geeked out together for a while. Like a couple of us, my wife and a friend of ours went down there, and we just, just had fun. So it's a great outlet. For me, it is my muse, and it is my I don't know, it's just that which I am in love with, that is not a person. It is because there are different types of love. So this is a love that maybe a filial type of love, a familiar, friendly love, that the plants, and my yard is surrounded by plants. So when I'm with my plants, it sounds a little weird, I just love being with them and doing what I do. And it informs my philosophy a little bit too. They are living creatures. They are alive.
Absolutely.
They have goal-directedness. They have, not to anthropomorphize them, but they have ambitions. They want to be healthy, and they want to, do their thing.
They want to thrive and do their thing.
And I'm not importing some kind of consciousness to, I'm not going in that direction. It's just they do what they do, and I respect that. So anyway, that's my love for plants.
My takeaway from that, which I think is so wonderful that you shared that, and it really is that the plants called to you, you responded by learning about them.
Yes.
So,
and that's falling in love. Yeah.
It is. I mean, we can laugh about it, but I think there's not much better in life than having something that so engages you that you want to know more about.
Yes.
So whether it's people or philosophy or plants or whatever, it's that thing in us that says, I want to know more. I want to be able to engage. And to do that, I need to grow, right?
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm.
So thank you for making that point as we wrap up the podcast. Any last words of wisdom you want to share?
Oh, Sarah, firstly, I wanted to just acknowledge you and offer my gratitude for opening up this space for both of us. What I might say to the audience is, if anything I rambled on about here piqued your interest, I'll make sure you have an email address, or you can, I'll put a link to my YouTube interview series, and they can just drop a comment and say, hey, I want to ask you something about such and such. And I'll just, because all I am is a conduit, and I'm happy to pass along names of people that can then, spiderweb out and do other connections and things like that. So if anybody wants to connect in that regard, they're welcome to contact me, and I'll pass anything I can along. Sweet. Because I want people to falling in love with whatever.
It lights up your life.
It does. And, again, if you're like that young entrepreneur and you're like, what's my next move? Your next move is to fall in love with what you're doing. And again, there's multiple types of love. So we're not talking passion. We're not talking romance. We're talking about, the love of relation, the love of reciprocity, of engaging with. And that's what romantic love is, of course, but it manifests in other ways.
Yep.
And it's okay to do that. It's not weird.
It is, and it's no, it's not weird, and it's a powerful force.
Look at football fans. It's a great analogy. They love their team so much. Yeah.
Don't get in the way of someone's favorite team.
No, that's love. Yeah. So that's a good example.
That was a good example. Well, I want to thank you for being on the podcast. I've had fun listening to you, kind of geeking out on some of that stuff. I wrote down some terms.
Okay.
Listeners, we always have, we'll again, but we always have connections to our guests. I do encourage you to check out Justin's YouTube channel. Also, if there was something that you took away from this, or you're just thinking, I would be curious to know that, make a comment, and if you're watching this or listening to it in wherever feed you're on, I would be interested in that. And also, if you've applied anything that Justin has shared today, just tell us how it went for you, because we know there are so many people on this path of seeking sense-making and applying it in their lives. The more people who share how that's worked for them, the better off for all of us. So that's my invitation to all of our listeners. And Justin, again, I just want to thank you for giving your time, for being on the No Labels, No Limits podcast.
Thank you, Sarah. And thank you for being a wise conversation partner. I appreciate it.
My pleasure.
You've been listening to the No Labels, No Limits podcast with best-selling author, change agent, and strategic business coach, Sarah Box. You can grab the show notes and find out how to work with Sarah at sarahbox.com/no-labels-no-limits-podcast. We'd love this podcast to reach as many people as possible. Please remember to rate, leave a 5-star review, and share the podcast with someone you think would get value from this conversation. Till next time, keep taking those daily action steps to align your purpose to your principles and achieve your goals in business and life.